The F-35 Lightning II Joint Strike Fighter is estimated to be the most expensive weapon system in human history, based on its projected lifetime cost of $1.5 trillion, $406 billion for the aircraft, the rest in lifetime operating costs, and that's before we factor in the endless cost overruns. One could argue there is a certain logic to this. The United States spends greater sums on the military than any other country, though some spend a greater percentage of GDP, and it has emphasized air power as its chief military instrument in recent decades. Additionally, different variants of the F-35 are prepared to equip the Air Force, Navy and Marines through most of the 21st century, and the type is also slated to serve in the Air Forces or Navies of Australia, Belgium, Denmark, Israel, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, Norway, South Korea and Turkey, with more countries likely to join the list. However, the F-35 program has been notoriously mismanaged and perpetually over budget, and remains far behind schedule. The Pentagon was persuaded to pay for concurrent production of F-35s before it had been developed into a fully operational prototype. Today Lockheed is shipping non-feature complete F-35s, which will need to be expensively upgraded later when new components and systems are finally ready. Listing everything that was and continues to be wrong with the F-35 procurement process could be the subject of many articles. But at the end of the day, however mismanaged the program may have been, does the F-35 at least amount to a decent jet fighter? Back in the 1990s, the U.S. Air Force developed the F-22 Raptor stealth fighter, which arguably still reigns as the top air superiority fighter in service. It is fast, highly maneuverable and extremely stealthy. However, the Raptor was less optimized for ground attack roles and deemed too expensive to build and operate to serve as a replacement of the Pentagon's large inventory of fourth-generation fighters, so production was cut to just 180 aircraft, 120 of which served in operational units. The Navy and Marines also needed a new fighter, so the Pentagon committed to building a more multi-role joint stealth fighter that would eventually replace the F-15, F-16, F-18 and AV-8 Harriers, serving in all four branches. The last time an inter-service fighter bomber was pursued, it didn't work out, but Lockheed and Boeing both gave their best shot anyway, and the former won the competition. The JSF was supposed to be a more affordable stealth fighter that could also be marketed to friendly nations, unlike the Raptor. The trickiest requirement for the JSF was the Marine Corps' insistence on making its version of the F-35 a jump jet. For historical reasons, the Leathernecks want jets like the Harrier that can fly off smaller Marine-operated amphibious carriers or remote forward bases. However, the compromises needed to make them work leave them significantly inferior to conventional fighters. Lockheed actually acquired schematics for a prototype Russian jump jet called the Yak-41, and tried to make the most aerodynamic airframe possible. To cut a long story short, the additional weight and bulkier fuselage necessary to make the F-35B jump jet version left all variants of the F-35 saddled with performance thresholds that are objectively inferior to the fourth-generation fighters it is intended to replace. The F-35 has a maximum speed of Mach 1.6, compared to Mach 2 to 2.5 for the F-16 and F-15, respectively. Its service ceiling is 50,000 feet, compared to 60,000 for the other models. In 2015, The Air Force tested the F-35 in a short-range dogfight with an F-16D mounting external fuel tanks, and the test pilot complained that it was simply outturned and less energy efficient than its more agile opponent. This critique doesn't mean that the F-35 is a terrible plane. In one post, scroll down for English, a Norwegian F-35 pilot praises its ability to maintain high angles of attack. Nonetheless, the Lightning remains less kinematically optimized for air-to-air combat than most fourth-generation fighters. The Air Force and Lockheed, however, insist that the F-35 isn't meant to engage in a within-visual range dogfight in the first place. After all, low-observable aircraft are stealthier when they are more distant from adversaries, and new beyond-visual range missiles like the AIM-120D or British Meteor that can strike enemies up to 100 miles away potentially allow an F-35 to sneak up on enemy aircraft and engage them with missiles without having to get close. Such a strategy is aided by the superior characteristics of U.S. active electronically scanned array radars. In this view of things, the F-35 would act as a sort of sniper in air-to-air engagements, stalking its prey from a distance until it has a good angle for a shot, releasing its weapons and then hightailing it for home before the, possibly faster, more maneuverable, enemy has a chance to come close enough to detect it and retaliate. And if more intense air battles are anticipated, then the more specialized F-22 could take some of the heat. No stealth fighter has ever shot down another jet in actual combat, and long-range air-to-air missiles have only been used a few times in action, so how the F-35 performs versus fourth-generation fighters depends a great deal on theory rather than operational experience. The Air Force feels this strategy has been validated by the results of repeated air combat exercises in which stealth fighters have racked up kill ratios as lopsided as 15:1 against faster, more maneuverable fourth-generation jets. And because of its low observable characteristics, the F-35 can pick and choose when to engage and when to withdraw from a dangerous opponent in a good position. Of course, those exercises are only good predictors of performance if they are built around correct assumptions about air warfare will work out. A big question remains, concerning how high the hit rate will be for long-range air-to-air missiles, which have seen limited use in actual combat. An estimated hit rate of 50% may prove optimistic. Here, F-35 doubters may point out that the Air Force overestimated the hit rate of its air-to-air missiles during the Vietnam War, resulting in disappointing kill ratios when pitted against North Vietnamese fighters in the conflict. Critics also point out that stealth would not prevent an F-35 from being detected if an enemy got close, as stealth fighters begin to appear on X-band targeting radars once the distance is short enough. Furthermore, though optimized for minimal infrared signature, stealth fighters remain susceptible to detection by infrared search and track (IRST) systems. Finally, the stealth fighters can be tracked using low-bandwidth radars, which are typically found on ground installations. Such radars lack the resolution to engage a stealth fighter with missiles from distance, but they could be used to direct intercepts by fighters, or to stage short-range ambushes with the targeting radars of surface-to-air missile systems, the latter a technique used to down an F-117 stealth fighter over Yugoslavia in 1999. Another tactic could be to overwhelm stealth fighters with a swarm of lower-cost jets, accepting some losses while charging into the short-range envelope. The F-35 is vulnerable in a tactic that caused the defeat of F-35s by inferior Chinese jets in a RAND Corporation simulation. F-35 proponents, in turn, are skeptical that the ability to pull off tight maneuvers is as useful as it once was, a view in sharp contrast to that of Russian aircraft manufacturers, which continue to produce super-maneuverable jets with vector thrust engines. American air combat doctrine emphasizes maintaining a high-energy state through speed and altitude that can be traded for speed. Pulling off extremely tight turns may help dodge a missile, but usually at the cost of so much energy that the aircraft will have little speed and altitude left to evade a follow-up attack.